If you're going across at the protein, the fiber, and then the micronutrients, you can see that the quinoa flour, the buckwheat flour, the tough flour, the chickpea flour, these provide multiple different micronutrients as well as the protein and the fiber. This slide I included for people who are trying to lose weight. If you're comparing food labels, it's always a good idea to compare the amount of calories, the amount of fiber, the amount of fat. So if we look at a gluten-free bread compared to a whole grain gluten-containing bread, whole grain gluten-containing bread on average is about 70 calories a slice. Some of the more recent, better tasting gluten-free bread slices have 150 calories per slice. So that's more than double the calories. And and then if you're eating 2 slices at one time, not really enjoying that much anyways, and then gaining weight, it can be very depressing for people. So it's always important to compare the different brands, try and choose the higher fiber ones, the ones that have less fat. Looking at a gluten-free hamburger bun, more than double the calories, as well as a lot more fat. And another example is the pretzels. So regular gluten-containing pretzels and bagels are fat-free. If you look at the gluten-containing ones, there's at least 5 grams of fat per bagel or per serving, per ounce of pretzels. So what to look for on food labels? I have some food labels for us to look at. But if you see the whole grain stamp or whole grain amaranth or whole grain rice or whatever in the ingredients, that's a good sign. If you look at the iron, in an ideal world, you would get way more than 4% iron per serving, but with the gluten-free foods, because they're not vitamin fortified, anything more than 4 is good. For calcium, more than 10%. The daily recommended value for calcium is 1,000 milligrams. So if you see 10%, that means it has 100 milligrams. For people who have osteopenia or osteoporosis, it's actually 1,500 milligrams, but for the purpose of food labeling, when they're referring to it on a food label, it refers to 1,000 milligrams. For fat, always look for low fat, less than 3 grams of fat per serving. For fiber, trying to find more than 5 grams of fiber if possible, less than 10 grams of sugar, and this is for a snack, aiming for less than 200 calories. So I put the rice checks because rice checks, corn checks, and Perkios are the only 3 vitamin-enriched, fortified, gluten-free cereals on the market at this time. None of the other gluten-free cereals have vitamins added. So this is a comparison of a Nature Path brand where you can see 4% iron, 0 vitamin A, 0 calcium, 0 vitamin C. And this one actually has more calories per serving size. So this is 3/4 of a cup of this cereal with 110 calories versus 1 full cup for 100 calories and 50% iron. Most of my patients have low iron levels because of the lack of fortification of the gluten-free foods. Now this has no fiber in it, but if you added some flaxseed and some fruit to it and or some nuts, you would increase the fiber content of this breakfast choice as well as getting multiple vitamins and minerals. And you can also see that it has whole grain brown rice as the second ingredient. This is another label comparison. One is just a regular gluten-free cracker, and the other is a cup of crackers made from amaranth. And you can see that the portion in terms of weight is almost the same. It's 28 versus 26. It's really important to always, when comparing labels, to look at the portion size so that if you're comparing, it's like comparing apples and oranges, is if the portion size was 50 grams versus 26 grams, it wouldn't be that helpful. I find that most of the foods, it's close to an ounce. So for this one, you can see that the calories are significantly less. The iron in the first cracker is 0%. That's sort of average for a gluten-free basic cracker, whereas the iron in this one is 13%, which is good. There's a little bit of calcium in this. There's 11 grams of fiber, as well as very little sugar. It's low in fat, not a lot of salt. So this is a really good way when you're doing your food shopping to try and decide whether you think this is a good choice for you for a meal or for a snack. And I think this is my last slide, but these are some, going back to the initial diet history that I had, which was the cornflakes for breakfast, switching to the gluten-free oats or kasha for breakfast would increase the micronutrients significantly. For lunch, switching from a tapioca bread to a soka or injera. So injera is the Ethiopian flatbread that's used. It's made from teff flour. And you can buy teff flour in most health food stores. If you Google the word injera recipe, or if you type in injera recipe, you'll come up with it. All that's required is yeast, teff flour, and water. There's nothing else added to it. Soka, if any of you have been to Nisa, which is an Italian restaurant in the theater district of the city, one of their items on their menu is soka. It's a chickpea crepe, chickpea flour crepe. So if you'd like to try it, you should go try it, and then you can decide whether or not you'd like to make it yourself. But again, it's using chickpea flour. So trying to include some of these ethnic types of foods in your diet to bump up the nutrition. In the evening, instead of having white rice or pasta, oh, and by the way, none of the pastas, or maybe like less than 5% of the gluten-free pastas are vitamin fortified. Most of them have no vitamins added to them at all. So if you are choosing pasta, the quinoa-based pasta, the soy noodle pasta, these ones will have significantly more iron and fiber. But for dinner, you can have the quinoa grain or the amaranth grain, or soybeans or chickpeas. And then for snacks, with choosing a whole grain gluten-free cracker, popcorn is actually considered a whole grain. So popcorn is a really nutritious snack. Just don't get theater-style popcorn, because then you'll be getting the same calories as chips. The other option would be in your muffins that you make, or your cookies if you cook at home, to try and choose healthy flours for baking. There's many gluten-free cookbooks now that are using the healthy flours, the chickpea flour, the quinoa flour. There's actually a recipe, quinoa.net, and on that website there's many, many, many gluten-free quinoa recipes for the pasta as well as alternatives. And one of the websites, the Cream Hill Estates, this is one of the oat companies that sells gluten-free oats. They have multiple recipes on their website as well using the gluten-free oats. And I think that's it. Oh, so just by changing the carbohydrate, you'll increase the fiber, decrease the fat and calories, get a lot more vitamins and minerals, and have a much better tasting, well-balanced, lower calorie diet. That's it. Any questions?
So, you know, the studies have shown that how well someone adheres to the diet is best determined by consultation with a nutritionist. Like having a normal tissue transglutaminase antibody does not tell you whether you're on a gluten-free diet. Like we did a survey of several thousand people that we're just about to publish, and they were taken, the surveys were taken from support groups, right? So they're all believers. And 90% of people said that they were strict with a gluten-free diet, but 80% admitted to cheating. So that's not being on a gluten-free diet. Like you're either on a gluten-free diet or you're not on a gluten-free diet. Like communion wafers and occasionally having gluten intentionally is not on a gluten-free diet. And it's really interesting that the bulk of people's biopsies don't normalize, and I think that's probably because it's so hard to get gluten out of the diet. Well, I think that we have to move on. I have to find out from Cynthia what we're doing next.
I think lunch.
I think it's lunch. I know it makes me very hungry, like hearing this conversation. So we will have time for more discussion. I hope during lunch the digestive processes will help people develop ideas what the Celiac Centre can be doing for people.